The third question is, how is the conflict represented? How is it depicted? So before we get into this, I want to very quickly talk about the idea of form versus content. That's really what we're talking about here. Content refers to what is the movie about. You can just think, the story or the narrative, something like that. This is the content of the movie. It's what is shown. The form of the movie is how it's shown. So here we're talking about different artistic elements of the movie, such as cinematography, editing, sound, and so on. So it's how these things are shown. And the content of a movie and the form of a movie can potentially send different signals. So that's why it's important to pay attention to that. A famous example of the difference between form and content is in gangster movies. So there's a movie called Public Enemy from the 1930s. This is a very old gangster movie. The content of the movie, the story, states that crime is bad. The gangster main character, he's clearly a bad guy. He does all kinds of crimes and bad things. And at the end of the movie, he is killed by the police, I believe, something like that. He gets his just desserts, however you might say it. There are consequences to his actions, and clearly he shouldn't have done those things. This comes in an era where movies were held to strict censorship standards. It's called the production code. It's a list of things that movies had to follow. One of the things on the production code was that if somebody commits crimes, they have to be punished for it by the end of the movie. So that you don't just have movies saying crime is bad. That's bad for the kids to see. You don't want kids watching movies saying crime is bad. That's the idea. So in Public Enemy, the content of the movie says that crime is bad. But the form of the movie, the way the movie's made, the way it's filmed, and how it shows these things, makes crime seem really fun. The movie's fun to watch. Maybe the main character's a bad guy, but it's fun to see him do all these bad things. And this is a very common thing in pretty much every gangster movie, pretty much every boxing movie. It's fun to watch this stuff happen. That's the point. I mean, if it wasn't fun, people wouldn't watch it. We now have a movie, Public Enemy, which is sending two different messages with its content and its form. What are we supposed to do with that? Well, the question we want to ask is it intentional or unintentional that the form and content are sending two not only different but completely opposite messages? In the case of Public Enemy, because it was made in the 1930s and the censorship required that the story had to end with consequences for the main character, and it had to send the message that crime is not good. The director didn't really have a choice in what message he sent through the content. But by sending a different message with the form of the movie, he is able to in some way get around the censorship. So it seems like in Public Enemy, this is probably intentional, where he had to say crime is bad with the story, but in the form of the movie, he was able to get around that and say crime is fun and exciting to watch. So in that movie, it seems like it might be intentional. We're still really just guessing at this point. But in other movies like Southpaw, which is more recent, a boxing movie from the 2010s, this movie is in a somewhat similar kind of situation where the story of the movie, it's about a boxer who is kind of a masochist. He works himself up by just letting the other guy punch him in the face, and and then he goes into Incredible Hulk mode and he wins, after he gets beat up. So it's about violence. It's, he's a boxer, so he's just a violent guy. But the story of the movie is about him realizing, well, I can't fight like this anymore. It's not good for my health. It's not safe, and violence is bad. There's some stuff with his wife, I believe. It's been a few years since I've seen it, but the story overall, the content sends the message that violence is bad, and this guy has to change his ways. But the form of the movie, again, is saying violence is really fun to watch. We get very excited for the boxing scenes. So here again, it's sending two different messages. The story says violence is bad, but the movie makes boxing look really exciting, and they don't have to do that. They could make it in a way where boxing seems horrible, it seems disgusting, it seems immoral, it seems bad, it seems frightening, but they don't. It's just exciting. In this case, this is different from Public Enemy, where they had a choice. They didn't have to make the story send the message that violence is bad. They made that conscious choice. And so it seems more like either this is an unintentional difference where the form and content are sending two different messages. Maybe they didn't really think that deeply about it, or maybe they just don't care. They thought the story was interesting, but they also want it to be a cool movie, so they make the boxing scenes very cool and fun, and if it wasn't fun, nobody would really watch it. So, they just kind of make the story is its own thing, and then the form of the movie we'll just make it fun anyway. So, they don't really care about the difference. There's no way to really tell, but this is an important question to think about. It tells us a lot more about Public Enemy. It at least tells us in Southpaw that there is a distinction, a difference between the two messages the movie is sending. Either it's unintentional or they didn't care, which are both, not... both of those we can make our own interpretation about if we think that is good or not. You might argue that, well, you should care. You shouldn't do something just because you think it'll be cool and it'll make money. You should make a statement about the world. This is art. It's not just, making whatever to make money. So that's an argument you can make for that movie. Before we wrap up this video, I want to touch on again Bedeviled, which we talked about in the two previous videos. In the video about the solution to the conflict, I talked about how there are two proposed solutions, and I mentioned that we're able to tell that one of them the movie implies is not good, one of them the movie implies is good, is the better choice. But how do we know that? Well, it falls down to this question we're asking: how is the action represented? In Bedeviled, you might recall there are two female characters. Each one proposes a different solution to the problem. The first woman snaps and she goes on a murder spree. The second woman goes to the police and reports the crimes that were committed. When the first woman goes on the murder spree, she also tries to murder the second female character. So we feel very frightened. It's a horror movie. We don't want her to kill this other woman because we like the other woman. The way it's filmed, in terms of the music they play, is scary music. The camera angles make the woman seem very frightening. Different things like this, we are able to identify that the movie is implying that this is bad. We're not supposed to want the character to do this. we're able to tell that from different elements of how the movie is made. So by looking at how the conflict is represented, we're able to say between these two choices, clearly going to the police is implied to be better, and murdering everybody is implied to not be better.